It was supposed to be just another day, like so many others, but the heavens at that exact moment seemed to hold something that the earth was not yet ready to hear. On April 8, 2024, a total solar eclipse crossed the skies of North America. Millions of people took to the streets of the United States to watch the phenomenon. Entire cities were plunged into darkness in broad daylight. A strip of shadow ran across the country, cutting through states such as Texas, Missouri, Illinois, and New York. The same states that, curiously, had already been crossed by another total eclipse in 2017. Two dark lines drawn on the map, intersecting over a single point, Little Egypt in southern Illinois. A curious name for a small American region, but not for those who know the scriptures. Out of Egypt I called my son, Hosea 11:1. Woe to the land that is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, Isaiah 18:1. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, Luke 21:25. The same week as the eclipse, the world was on fire. Protests broke out in Jerusalem after clashes between Israeli forces and extremist groups on the Temple Mount. Tensions spread like an invisible wave. Meanwhile, in New York, the UN was meeting to discuss a new global governance model based on climate peace and common values. President Joe Biden, in a speech, mentioned a new era of humanity. A seemingly optimistic phrase, but one that sent shivers down the spines of theologians and scholars of prophecy. At the same time, Pope Francis made a statement that went almost unnoticed. We need a common spiritual language that unites peoples, a phrase that echoes like a whisper from the past or the future. And then, something even more peculiar happened. As the shadows of the eclipse crossed the skies of the United States, an earthquake struck Taiwan, toppling buildings and causing the ground to split open as if the earth were letting out a scream. The 7.4 magnitude tremor was not just an earthquake. It was a message for those who know how to hear. The sky darkens, the earth shakes, officials give speeches, and most just watch. But what almost no one noticed is that all of these events, the eclipse, the earthquake, the speeches, happened during the Jewish Passover calendar, a time that, in Scripture, has always been linked to deliverance, judgment, and prophetic beginnings. And there's more. Experts warn that the eclipse, along with the one in 2017, formed a pattern in the sky known as an X over the United States, a symbol that, throughout history, has always been associated with cancellation, separation, or marking. Coincidence? Maybe. But for some, this X is more than an astronomical drawing. It is a silent warning, a prophetic mark that something is being sealed. And could the marked place, Little Egypt, be the key? A new exodus about to happen? A judgment that is approaching? Or something more ancient? Something that goes back to the times when the sun was darkened in Egypt, before the cry for liberation echoed in the streets. The fact is that there has never been so much movement in the heavens and so much silence in souls. The prophetic clock seems to be accelerating, but no one knows for sure what time we are in. And while the world tries to explain the phenomena with science and geopolitics, a question whispers in the wind. Are we about to touch what is sacred without knowing the price? Because on the other side of the ocean, someone is about to rebuild an ancient altar. He spoke softly with a tired voice, but each word echoed as if it carried the weight of centuries. Before a select audience in a hidden room in the Vatican, Pope Francis declared, "The time has come to unify beliefs under a common spiritual ethic." Many applauded. Others simply looked at each other in silence. Few realized the gravity of that moment. Meanwhile, more than 2,000 kilometers away in Israel, archaeologists announced a discovery that shook the foundations of biblical history. Ancient stones, carved with primordial Hebrew inscriptions, were found at Alta Haraheim in the region of Samaria, a place that some scholars believe to be the original altar of Abraham, where he would have raised his offering to God shortly after leaving Ur of the Chaldees. And he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him, Genesis 12:7. Two events, two geographies, one time. But are we talking about coincidence or fulfillment? The soil of the east and the dome of the west seemed to breathe together that week. The sacred was being touched, both in stone and in doctrine. And each touch, each declaration, sounded like the movement of pieces on an invisible chessboard. In Rome, leaders of various religions were meeting to discuss the formation of a World Spiritual Council, a sort of united nation of faith. The argument was simple: to end fanaticism, to promote peace. But between the lines, older voices murmured, "The tower is being raised again." And the tower, as we know, has already fallen once. In Israel AL, rabbis discussed whether the discovery of the altar could speed up plans to rebuild the Third Temple. For many, this is not just archaeology, it is eschatology. A fine line separates science from the final judgment. When you see the abomination of desolation, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Matthew 24:15. Could this be the holy place being prepared? Some say that Abraham's altar is the starting point for the reactivation of sacrifices, a practice suspended for almost 2,000 years. But amid so many intentions and excavations, a silence hangs in the air. What happens when the sacred is reactivated without the permission of the sacred? At the same time, symbolic images circulate on the networks. Pope Francis, alongside imams, rabbis, and Buddhist monks, planting an olive tree in Jerusalem, a gesture of peace. Or is it a harbinger of something greater, perhaps even prophetic? After all, Zechariah speaks of 2 olive branches standing before the Lord of all the earth, Zechariah 4:14. But who are these 2 witnesses today? International analysts look at events with pragmatism, but there are those who look with fear. The Vatican moves, Israel digs, the world watches, and all the while, the invisible foundations of the spiritual world seem to be shaking. It's not just about politics or religion, it's about memory. It's about what was sealed before us and is now slowly being reopened. Like a forgotten ark, like a book of seals broken one by one. And perhaps at this very moment, without knowing it, we are all standing on holy ground. But like Moses before the bush, no one has taken off their sandals. The question that remains is, who will dare to put their hands on the altars and survive? Because in another part of the world, voices are beginning to be raised, and some of them are coming from the valley of dry bones. The nations were gathered, steel domes, open microphones, flags side by side, as if peace were a real possibility. In Moscow, Vladimir Putin, with an impassive face, declared to the world, "The global order is collapsing. A new reality is emerging." Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, Joe Biden, speaking before the UN General Assembly, spoke of a new world based on democratic alliances, but among these carefully chosen words, there was something that escaped the common ear, something that seemed to be written in another language, one that only the ancient prophets would understand. The bones were very dry. Ezekiel 37:2. When the prophet Ezekiel had his vision in the valley of dry bones, he did not just see death. He saw buried memory, forgotten glory, dormant power. Bones that in human eyes were lost, but in God's eyes were ready to rise. And now, like a prophetic echo, world leaders talk about reconstruction, resurgence, a new order. Coincidence? In the same period, Israel passed laws that sparked intense discussions about religious identity and control of sacred territory. And in Jerusalem, protests erupted not just over politics, but over something deeper, something that burns in the soul of an ancient people, a fight for the right to remember who they are, or who they are being forced to become. And from Brazil, in silence, President Lula returned from meetings with Xi Jinping and representatives of the Arab League, defending a new multipolar model, a world with many voices, as he put it. But the question is not how many voices there are, but who is leading the choir. And I prophesied as I was commanded, and the Spirit entered them, and they lived. Ezekiel 37:10. Is the Spirit returning to the bones? Across the world, nationalist, populist, and messianic movements are emerging. In France, Hungary, the US, and even Israel, voices are calling for leaders who will save the people and recover their roots. Leaders who not only govern, but who embody prophecies. And in this scenario, images come to life. Soldiers marching, protesters praying in different languages, crosses next to flags, men and women with flaming eyes crying out for justice or revenge. War, experts say, is no longer fought with tanks. It is fought with algorithms, with narratives, with symbols. But some symbols, like Ezekiel's valley, cannot be manipulated so easily. The world, perhaps without realizing it, is returning to the same valley where voices are heard before bodies rise. the same valley where bones begin to move before breath returns. And then, as if rising from the ashes of history, a question begins to take shape. Are we witnessing the resurrection of ancient empires, disguised under the banners of modernity? Are the winds that blow from the east and the west the four winds of the spirit? Or are the bones, as they move, forming something that no one is ready to see? The voices are broken, but they are not silent, because in another part of the world, while the powerful are speaking, someone has just had a vision in the Hollywood lights, and she was not of this world. The lights come on, the red carpet is rolled out, the cameras blink like hungry eyes. It's Oscar night, a night of glamour, status, and idols, but something strange was in the air. In the center of that sacred stage for the entertainment industry, one of the most awarded actresses of our time, recognized for her activism and roles that have marked generations, went up to receive her statuette. But she didn't speak about politics. She didn't thank Hollywood. She didn't celebrate her career. She cried. And then, in front of millions of viewers around the world, she said, "I died for 3 minutes. And in that time, I saw something. A place full of light, but without a sun. And a courtroom where everyone awaited trial, but the judge didn't show himself. The silence in the audience was uncomfortable. The presenter's rehearsed laughter lost its rhythm. Something about that moment seemed out of place, as if the stage itself had been invaded by a voice from another world. The next morning, gossip sites scoffed. Theorists were divided. But that same day, on the other side of the continent, a magnitude 4.6 earthquake struck California, shaking movie studios and collapsing an ancient church in Los Angeles. In the crash, a wooden cross split in half before local cameras. For the time has come for judgment to begin with the house of God. 1 Peter 4:17. Was it just another tremor or a sign? Hollywood has always been more than an industry. It was, and still is, a modern cathedral where the altars are the screens, the priests are the directors, and the sacrifices often are souls. But in recent months, something seems to have changed. Celebrities have been speaking openly about intense spiritual experiences. Actor Jim Caviezel, for example, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, has made headlines again with statements about spiritual warfare, child trafficking, and the need for national repentance. Other actors have suddenly abandoned established careers, reporting nightmares, visions, and unexplained attacks. And as if the stage on Earth were being dismantled, the heavens have responded with increasingly clear signs. In the same month as the Oscars, Aurora Borealis invaded regions where they had never been seen before, coloring the skies purple and blood red, like celestial curtains closing after the last act. Blow the trumpet in Zion, for the day of the Lord is near. Joel 2:1. What if the trumpet was not sounding in the heavens? What if it had already begun to sound in the arts, in culture, in everything that shapes the collective imagination? After all, cinema shapes generations. But what if cinema itself is now receiving a wake-up call, a warning, or a judgment? The actress who made the speech has not given interviews since. She has withdrawn from social media. She has not appeared on talk shows. But in a quickly deleted post, someone from her team wrote, "She saw something she can't explain, but she says we are not who we think we are. Maybe we are all acting out a script we did not write. And maybe the credits are about to roll, without applause. But as the lights go down in Hollywood, a new spotlight is shining on the nations, and it illuminates something even deeper. What lies behind the currency that no one sees. It was not announced with trumpets, or with headlines in bold letters, but the change has happened, and almost no one has noticed. Behind the scenes of the global financial system, a new kind of currency is being shaped. Invisible to the common eye, but omnipresent in the wings of power. The digital dollar, a project advanced by the United States Federal Reserve, is entering the testing phase in states such as New York and Massachusetts. At the same time, in Brazil, the central bank has already named its national version of digital currency, DREX, a soft acronym for a system that aims to replace paper with electronic pulses and the wallet with an access code. But what is at stake goes far beyond money, so that no one may buy or sell except he who has the mark. Revelation 13:17. For decades, these words were treated as an allegory, but today they take shape before our eyes. Not as an implanted chip, but as an encrypted code within global digital authentication systems. According to the central bank, Drex will allow payments with smart contracts, real-time tracking, integration with public and private systems, all in the name of efficiency and transparency. But experts warn, if every transaction is recorded, every consumer decision could be monitored and controlled. And when control meets ideology, freedom becomes an illusion. Meanwhile, in China, the digital yuan is already a reality in major cities. In Canada, peaceful protests were silenced by freezing bank accounts without a court order. And in Europe, the digital euro is beginning to take shape with promises of economic security in the face of future crises. But the question that remains is, what if digital currency is not just an economic tool, but a new form of spiritual submission? An invisible mark, not on the skin, but on the mind. In the Bible, the beast system does not begin with terror. It begins with a promise of order, of convenience, of progress. And the prophecy does not only mention the mark, it speaks of worship, because true control is not financial, it is existential. It is not just about what you buy, but about who you serve. Impressive images are already circulating on the internet. A store in Germany that only accepts digital payments with facial authentication. Supermarkets in China where your face replaces your card. And in the United States, companies like Amazon are testing systems in which the palm of your hand becomes your identity. Ancient prophecies spoke of brands. Modern algorithms speak of convenience, but the spirit behind it remains the same. And all of this is being packaged as something inevitable, as a natural next step. But since when does the natural impose itself by decree? We may be facing the greatest exchange in human history: privacy for security, autonomy for speed, freedom for a number. And perhaps the brand no longer needs to be imposed by force. It is enough that it is accepted voluntarily. Let anyone who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. Revelation 13:18. Because the number is already among us. It pulses in every app, vibrates in every two-factor authentication, hides in every line of code in banking systems that promise peace, but demand obedience. And at the center of it all, a question persists, like a silent echo. Are we being prepared to worship without realizing it? But while the world's eyes are on digital currencies, someone very strange, someone who claims to have returned from the dead, is attracting thousands with a message that seems out of this world. He appeared like a shadow amidst the lights. No one knew exactly where he came from or who sent him. He just appeared, with a deep gaze, simple clothes, and a story that defied logic. His name, it didn't matter. What mattered was what he said. In a video that went viral within hours, he looked directly into the camera and said, "I was dead, 3 minutes." On the other side, there was no silence. There was a roar. And that roar was not of anger, it was of justice, and it's coming. His words were accompanied by an unsettling calm. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't preaching, he was just stating, like someone who has seen too much and returned, not to convince, but to warn. While the video was circulating, something was happening quietly in the heart of the Middle East. The Israeli government was approving a set of controversial religious laws, including a bill that would allow Jewish prayers on the Temple Mount, challenging decades of delicate agreements. The response was immediate: confrontations, diplomatic tensions, global security alerts. And it shall be for you as a sign on your hands and as frontlets between your eyes. Deuteronomy 6:8. Ancient symbols return, forgotten laws are remembered. But why now? The man in the video does not mention politics, but in quick interviews, he has let slip disjointed phrases, or perhaps deliberately enigmatic ones. They are opening the gates of the temple, but they have forgotten that there are guards outside and inside. Social media exploded. Theologians call him a prophet, atheists a charlatan. But interestingly, in 3 different countries, people claim to have dreamed about him before seeing him online. They described the same eyes, the same phrases. Coincidence? Or a pattern emerging where no one is paying attention? Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, the sky suddenly darkened due to a sandstorm blowing in from the desert, something meteorologists described as unseasonable and inexplicable. A red cloud hovered over the city for 23 minutes, the same amount of time that the video of the man who came back from the dead was available before it was deleted from the original platform. And at the end of the age, I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Joel 2:28. But what exactly did this man see? And why now? In an alternative podcast, one of his phrases reverberated like thunder among listeners. What is coming is not a war. It is an adjustment, and the court has already begun. Only the judge has not spoken yet. There is something unsettling about his serenity, as if he carries within him the silence of a heaven that has already given its sentence, but has not yet read it aloud. The figure disappeared as quickly as it appeared. No one can confirm his real identity. Some images show him walking barefoot through Jerusalem, as if searching for something that is no longer there. Meanwhile, experts warn that a special division, a deep spiritual divide, is forming between nations, cultures, and religions. But what if this division is not just ideological? What if it is prophetic? What if this man's words are more than just post-mortem experiences? What if they are a harbinger? Because now, while the world digests the mystery of this apparition, a political pact between Brazil and Israel is beginning to be signed, and something ancient is beginning to move behind the scenes. The witnesses, who had been silent for so long, are about to speak. It was discreet, silent, like everything that is truly dangerous. Last week, representatives of Israel and Brazil signed a historic cooperation agreement involving cybersecurity, precision agriculture, and mainly inter-religious initiatives for cultural and spiritual preservation. The press covered it formally, but between the lines something deeper was being woven. During the ceremony, the presidents did not mention the name of God, but behind the scenes, Jewish and evangelical religious leaders exchanged smiles laden with symbolism. On the Brazilian side, influential pastors posted on social media, "We are living in a prophetic generation." On the Israeli side, rabbis said, "The bridge between the nations is being restored, and I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days. Revelation 11:3. What could these two witnesses be? In biblical eschatology, they emerge as isolated but powerful voices, speaking out in the midst of global chaos, denouncing systems and calling for repentance. But what if they are not just two men? What if they are two peoples, two spiritual blocks, two nations linked by a hidden purpose? Brazil and Israel, the country with the largest number of Pentecostal Christians in the world, and the land where the Messiah was promised and crucified. A continent of faith in turmoil, united with a nation of ancient prophecies. This union raised alarms in secular groups and provoked harsh statements from the secular media. The state must be secular, they said, but in the streets, thousands of believers celebrated. Many claim to have had dreams and visions that same night. Some children reported, with astonishing similarity, having seen two men dressed in white walking through Brasilia and disappearing into the sky. Collective imagination, or spirituality awakening. Meanwhile, verbal attacks against evangelical Christians are increasing in the traditional media, in Brazil, and in several Latin American countries. The persecution still has no face nor uniform, but it exists, subtle, emotional, institutional. Laws are tightening, speeches are becoming more heated, and pulpits are starting to get nervous. In parallel, Israel is experiencing days of historic decision. The government is divided between alliances with the West and promises of unity with Arab nations. Tension between Orthodox and secular Jews is increasing. The Temple Mount remains closed, but it is as if someone had already put the key in the lock. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war with them. Revelation 11:7. There seems to be no room for coincidences. The union between Brazil and Israel may seem strategic, but in the language of the heavens, nothing is just geopolitics. There are pacts that are not signed with pens, but with blood, prayer, and eternal purpose. And perhaps, somewhere that the eyes cannot reach, the witnesses are already speaking, not on national television, but in the invisible deserts of the spiritual world. In neglected bookstores, in small churches, in videos that disappear minutes after going viral, because when two people unite in the name of something greater, the spiritual world responds, and when the witnesses stand up, the system trembles. But there is still a question that no one dares to ask. What if the time of testimony is ending, and the heavens are about to fall silent? Because while everyone is looking at Israel and Brazil, the sky over Tel Aviv is getting darker, and a child in Jerusalem just said, "The clock has stopped, Mummy, but I still hear the beating." The sky didn't give a warning. It just changed color. In Tel Aviv, red clouds filled the horizon. In Dallas, the sunset turned into a purple curtain, as if blood and fire were mixed. In Brasilia, a flash of light appeared between the clouds, and for a few seconds the ambient sound simply stopped. It wasn't an eclipse. It wasn't the aurora borealis, and meteorologists couldn't find any answers. But while science searched for explanations, the signs kept coming, subtle but perfectly aligned. The night is coming when no one can work. John 9:4. It was late afternoon when sirens sounded in Israel, warning of a possible threat coming from the Gaza Strip. On the same day, storms swept through Texas, knocking out power lines, flooding roads and leaving thousands without power, literally and symbolically. In South America, beaches along the Brazilian coast were hit by an unusual tide that swept over boardwalks and dragged small boats to the avenues. There was no earthquake, no tsunami warning, just the water deciding not to obey the banks anymore. Meanwhile, 3 men were giving speeches: Trump, Netanyahu, and Lula. 3 styles, 3 nations, but all curiously talking about irreversible change, national preparation, and challenges that require faith and courage. But faith in what? Courage for what? Preparation for what? The cameras were filming, the journalists were taking notes, but there was something out of the frame, something that only those who watch with the eyes of the Spirit can capture. On the outskirts of Jerusalem, a mother recorded a video of her 6-year-old daughter looking up at the sky and saying, "Mummy, time has stopped, but I still hear knocking." The video went viral but was quickly removed for sensitive content. Too sensitive. For whom? "And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity." Luke 21:25. In recent months, something has been building up in the world. It's not political nor social, it's spiritual. As if there were an invisible tension and expectation in the heavens, as if time were waiting for a command. And perhaps we are living in the last moments of light. Not physical light, but the awareness of truth. The last chance to see what has always been before our eyes, that everything is connected, that nothing is a coincidence, that the signs have been left for those who know how to read. While global leaders gather, currencies change, laws are written, earthquakes multiply, and mysterious witnesses appear on the corners of the planet, there is a silence that is more frightening than the noise, the silence of the sleeping consciousness. But the question that echoes now is, what if this really is the last light before night, the last tick before the clock stops? Because something, or someone, is about to rise, and what comes next will no longer be news. It will be the fulfillment of what has always been written. And you? Are you just going to watch in, or will you wake up? If this touched something inside you, don't ignore it. Share it. Someone you love may be about to have their eyes opened. Leave a comment. Do you also feel that something different is happening in the world? What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. Mark 13:37. Until the next revelation, because the heavens have not yet said their last word.